What if the very quality the world praises in a man is the one most capable of enslaving him? From childhood, he is told to be useful, to be dependable, to be the one others can rely on. Teachers reward it, employers demand it, friends expect it, and slowly, almost invisibly, usefulness becomes not an action he chooses, but an identity he carries. Yet there is a dangerous truth hidden beneath this virtue. The more useful a man becomes, the more the world begins to see him not as a sovereign being but as a tool. And tools are not respected, they are used. Modern society disguises this reality with polite language. They call it teamwork, they call it loyalty, they call it being a good person. But beneath these words lies a quieter, colder mechanism. The man who proves he can carry weight will be given more weight. The man who proves he can solve problems will be handed every problem. The man who proves he can endure pressure will be crushed beneath it. And rarely, if ever, will anyone stop to ask whether he wishes to carry such burdens at all. Niccolò Machiavelli observed centuries ago that men are judged not by their sacrifices, but by their power. The prince who exhausts himself pleasing everyone becomes weak. The leader who is always available becomes predictable, and predictability in the realm of power is the first step toward disappearance. History offers countless examples of this quiet destruction. Advisors who served too faithfully were discarded the moment they became inconvenient. Generals who fought brilliantly were removed once the war was won because their usefulness had ended. Servants who devoted their lives to their masters found themselves forgotten the moment their strength declined. The pattern repeats endlessly because the nature of human appetite never changes. People consume what is available, they lean on what is stable, and they rarely question the cost paid by the one who provides stability. The first trap of usefulness is that it feels noble. It feels righteous to be the one who helps, the one who fixes, the one who carries. There is pride in being needed. There is a subtle intoxication in hearing others say, "I could not have done this without you." But that intoxication is precisely what blinds a man. Because the man who is always needed is never free. He cannot refuse without guilt. He cannot withdraw without being judged. He cannot disappear without provoking resentment. His time no longer belongs to him. His energy no longer belongs to him. Even his thoughts begin to revolve around the expectations of others. And slowly, imperceptibly, his life ceases to be his own. The modern world intensifies this trap in ways Machiavelli himself could scarcely have imagined. Messages arrive at every hour. Requests multiply without limit. Every skill becomes a demand, every competence an obligation. The man who proves himself capable becomes a magnet for the unfinished business of others. And the cruelest part is this: the more he gives, the more is expected, not less, never less. A man may believe that by being useful, he earns loyalty, but loyalty purchased through usefulness is the weakest form of loyalty that exists. It lasts only as long as the usefulness lasts. The moment he falters, the moment he hesitates, the moment he becomes tired, the tone changes, gratitude dissolves, expectations remain, and he discovers, often too late, that he was never valued as a person, only as a function. There is a quiet scene that illustrates this truth with painful clarity. Imagine a war room late at night. Maps spread across a vast wooden table, generals whispering, candles flickering, tension hanging in the air. In one corner stands a strategist who has solved every crisis, predicted every movement, saved the campaign more than once. Everyone depends on him, everyone praises him. But the moment the war ends, the room empties. The candles are extinguished, the maps are rolled away, and the strategist stands alone, no longer essential, no longer summoned, no longer seen. His usefulness was his power, and his usefulness was his disappearance. This is the paradox most men never recognize. Power does not come from being indispensable. True power comes from being irreplaceable in ways that are not obvious, not measurable, not easily consumed. The man who is openly useful becomes predictable. The man who is predictable becomes manageable, and the man who is manageable becomes controlled. There is a deeper psychological cost as well, one that unfolds slowly and almost silently. The useful man begins to measure his worth by how much he provides. He begins to fear stillness, because stillness feels like uselessness. He fills every hour, answers every call, accepts every responsibility, not always because he must, but because he no longer knows who he is without the role of the provider. And so he runs. He runs until exhaustion becomes normal. He runs until silence feels uncomfortable. He runs until the idea of stopping feels like death itself. But in running so endlessly, he forgets to ask a single dangerous question. Who benefits from this? Because it is rarely him. Those around him grow stronger, while he grows weaker. Their time expands, while his contracts. Their ambitions rise, while his remain suspended, postponed, always deferred to a later moment that never arrives. And the most tragic part is that many will praise him while this happens. They will call him generous, reliable, admirable. They will admire his sacrifice precisely because it cost them nothing. Applause, in such moments, is not honor. It is anesthesia. It dulls the pain just enough to keep him giving. Machiavelli understood something most moral teachings refuse to admit. Men respect strength, not sacrifice. They admire the one who controls his time, not the one who gives it away freely. They follow the man who sets limits, not the one who dissolves himself in service to everyone. And yet, from the earliest years, most men are trained in the opposite direction. They are taught that refusal is selfish, that boundaries are cold, that saying no is unkind. But a man who cannot say no does not possess kindness. He possesses weakness disguised as virtue, and the world, though it may smile at such weakness, will never truly respect it. There comes a moment in every life when a man must decide whether he wishes to be a pillar or a sovereign. The pillar supports others, but remains fixed, immobile, bearing weight until it cracks. The sovereign moves, chooses, directs his energy where it serves his own design. Both roles have dignity, but only one grants freedom. Most never realize they have a choice. They wake each morning, already obligated, already committed, already carrying burdens they never consciously agreed to bear. And because the chains are invisible, they do not recognize them as chains at all. They call it responsibility, they call it maturity, they call it life. But beneath these words lies a quieter truth. A man who is always useful is a man whose life is slowly being consumed, one request at a time, one favor at a time, one expectation at a time, until nothing remains that is purely his own. And by the time he sees this clearly, years may have passed, opportunities may have vanished, and the realization arrives like a cold wind in an empty room. He was useful, but he was never free. There is a moment, often quiet and almost unnoticeable, when the useful man begins to feel a strange heaviness in his chest. Not exhaustion alone, but something deeper. A sense that he is always in motion, yet going nowhere. Always solving, yet never building. Always answering, yet never being heard. This is the beginning of awakening, though many mistake it for fatigue. Because fatigue can be cured with rest. But the realization that one's life is being consumed by the needs of others is far more unsettling. It cannot be cured by a weekend, nor by sleep, nor by distraction. It demands a reckoning. The man who has built his identity around usefulness faces a terrifying question. If he stops being useful, who is he? And so most never stop. They continue, not because they wish to, but because the alternative feels like stepping into emptiness. Usefulness becomes not merely a habit, but a shield against the fear of insignificance. As long as others need him, he feels he matters. As long as he is busy, he does not have to confront the silence. But silence is where sovereignty begins. Machiavelli wrote that the prince must learn how not to be good when circumstances demand it. This was not a celebration of cruelty, as many misunderstand, but a recognition of reality. A ruler who cannot withdraw, who cannot deny, who cannot harden himself when necessary, becomes prey to those who can. The same principle governs the life of any man. The inability to refuse is not kindness, it is exposure. Those who study power closely understand this instinctively. Observe the most influential figures in any domain. They are not constantly available. They are not endlessly responsive. Their time is guarded, their attention selective, their presence deliberate. And because they are scarce, they are valued. Scarcity, more than generosity, creates respect. This truth disturbs many, because it contradicts the moral teachings repeated since childhood. They have been told that the more one gives, the more one will be loved. Yet in practice, The man who gives without restraint often finds himself surrounded not by love, but by quiet entitlement. People grow accustomed to his giving. They stop noticing it. What was once appreciated becomes expected, and expectation is the silent killer of gratitude. There is a particular cruelty in this transformation. The useful man does not notice it at first. He believes he is strengthening relationships, building loyalty, securing his place in the world. But slowly, the tone of requests changes. There is less asking, more assuming, less thanks, more urgency, less recognition, more pressure. And he wonders, sometimes late at night, when it changed. It changed the moment usefulness became predictable. A wolf that hunts every night in the same place eventually starves, not because prey disappears, but because predictability invites exploitation. Hunters begin to wait for him. Traps are laid. The very consistency that once ensured success becomes the cause of his downfall. So it is with men. The man who is always there, always helping, always available, becomes easy to use precisely because he never withdraws. There is no risk in asking him. There is no cost in demanding more. And where there is no cost, there is no respect. Respect requires the possibility of loss. This is a truth many find difficult to accept. They wish to be liked, to be seen as dependable, to be known as generous. But respect is born, not from pleasing others, but from the quiet understanding that one's time and energy are not freely accessible. It is the boundary, not the sacrifice, that commands regard. Consider the court of a Renaissance ruler. Advisors crowded the halls, each eager to prove their usefulness, each ready to offer solutions, each striving to be indispensable. Yet the ruler listened most carefully to the one who spoke least, the one who appeared only when necessary, the one whose silence carried weight. Why? Because restraint suggests depth, silence suggests control, and control suggests power. The useful man speaks often because he feels compelled to prove himself. The sovereign man speaks rarely because he knows his value does not require constant demonstration. There is a profound difference between the two. One seeks approval, the other commands attention. The tragedy is that most men spend years training themselves to be useful, but almost no time learning to be formidable. They sharpen their skills, refine their knowledge, increase their productivity, believing that competence alone will grant them authority over their lives. But competence without boundaries is servitude. The world does not reward the most capable man. It rewards the man who understands how and when to withhold his capability. This withholding is not laziness. It is strategy. To reveal everything one can do is to surrender leverage. To give endlessly is to erase one's own importance. The man who solves every problem deprives others of the chance to struggle, and in doing so, he makes himself the permanent servant of their comfort. And comfort, once granted, becomes a demand. There is also a deeper psychological shift that occurs when a man is always useful. He begins to anticipate the needs of others before they are even spoken. He organizes his life around expectations that may never have been explicitly stated. He lives in a constant state of readiness, like a soldier who never leaves the battlefield. Such vigilance slowly erodes the spirit, because a life lived in reaction is not a life directed by one's own will. It is a life shaped by external forces, by the endless tide of demands that pull a man further and further from his own ambitions. And ambition, neglected long enough, does not merely sleep, it withers. There are men who wake one morning and realize that years have passed since they pursued anything purely for themselves. Their days were spent solving, fixing, supporting, answering, and while they were busy preserving the lives of others, their own remained unfinished. This realization is not dramatic. It does not arrive with thunder. It arrives quietly, like dust settling in an abandoned room. And it is in that quiet moment that a man begins to see the cost of being endlessly useful. He sees the dreams postponed, the opportunities declined, the risks never taken. He sees the version of himself that might have existed had he guarded his time as fiercely as he guarded the comfort of others. And he understands, perhaps for the first time, that usefulness without intention is a form of slow self-erasure. The world rarely notices this erasure. It continues to ask, to demand, to expect. It continues to consume whatever is offered freely. And if the useful man finally falters, if he finally says no, if he finally withdraws, The reaction is often not gratitude for what he gave, but irritation at what he no longer provides. This is the final proof. He was never valued for who he was, only for what he did. And when a man understands this fully, something begins to change inside him. Not bitterness, not anger, something colder, clearer, more precise. He begins to see the game. To see the game is to feel a strange calm settle over the mind. The useful man, once awakened, begins to observe the world differently. He notices how conversations shift when he delays his response. He notices how quickly urgency fades when he does not rush to solve it. He notices how problems that once seemed to demand his immediate intervention are suddenly resolved by others when he is no longer available. And this realization is both liberating and unsettling, because it reveals a truth few wish to confront. Many of the burdens he carried were never truly his to bear. They were simply convenient for others to place upon him. Convenience is a powerful force. People follow the path of least resistance, and the useful man becomes that path. He is the easiest solution, the most reliable answer, the most predictable source of support. And so the world flows toward him endlessly, without pause, without hesitation. But the moment he steps aside, the flow redirects. Others adapt. Others take responsibility. Others discover capabilities they never needed to develop before. And he begins to understand that his constant usefulness was not always an act of generosity. Sometimes it was an act of interference. By solving every problem, he prevented others from growing. By carrying every burden, he encouraged others to remain weak. By making himself indispensable, he built a prison whose walls were made of expectations. This realization does not make him cruel. It makes him precise. Machiavelli understood that power often lies not in action but in restraint. The general who commits his forces too early loses flexibility. The ruler who reveals all his intentions loses leverage. And the man who gives all his energy leaves himself with nothing to command. Restraint is not passivity. It is control over timing. There is a profound difference between the man who cannot help himself from acting and the man who chooses when to act. One is driven by impulse or obligation. The other is guided by design. And design is the foundation of authority over one's own life. The awakened man begins to experiment quietly. He does not announce his transformation. He does not declare new rules or boundaries with dramatic speeches. He simply begins to pause. He lets messages wait. He allows others to struggle. He declines small requests without explanation. And he observes. At first, there is resistance, confusion, even irritation. People who were accustomed to immediate answers begin to ask what is wrong. They may accuse him of changing, of becoming distant, of losing his generosity. But beneath these accusations lies something more revealing. They are not mourning the loss of his friendship. They are mourning the loss of his convenience. This distinction, once seen, cannot be unseen. There is a certain cold clarity that arrives in this stage. The man begins to understand that relationships built entirely on usefulness are not relationships at all. They are transactions disguised as affection. And transactions, by their nature, end when the value exchange ends. This understanding does not make him withdraw from the world completely. It makes him selective. He begins to ask himself a question he never asked before. Is this request aligned with the life I am building? Or is it merely consuming the life I already have? This question becomes a compass. And like any true compass, it does not always point toward comfort. Sometimes it directs him away from people who have been in his life for years. Sometimes it leads him into solitude, into long stretches of silence where the noise of constant demands no longer reaches him. And in that silence, something long buried begins to re-emerge. His own thoughts. For years, perhaps decades, his mind was occupied with the problems of others. Plans, deadlines, crises, responsibilities, endless cycles of reaction. But now, in the absence of constant interruption, he begins to think again, not about what others need, but about what he wants to build, what he wishes to become, what kind of life would truly satisfy him. This rediscovery is both exhilarating and frightening, because freedom is heavier than obligation. Obligation tells a man what to do. Freedom demands that he decide for himself. Many retreat at this stage. They return to usefulness because it is familiar, because it provides structure, because it shields them from the uncertainty of choosing their own path. It is easier to be needed than to be self-directed, but the man who continues forward begins to feel a quiet strength growing within him. Not the loud, boastful confidence of those who seek attention, but a deeper, steadier assurance. The assurance that his time belongs to him, that his energy is no longer scattered, that his life is no longer being consumed in fragments. This strength changes the way he moves through the world. He speaks less, but his words carry more weight. He commits to fewer things, but fulfills them with greater precision. He no longer rushes to fill every silence. And because of this, others begin to lean closer when he does speak. Scarcity creates gravity. This is the paradox of power that Machiavelli observed in courts and kingdoms alike. The man who is always present becomes invisible. The man who appears selectively becomes unforgettable. Presence gains value when it is not constant. There is also a subtle shift in how others treat him. Some drift away, unable to tolerate the loss of easy access. Others begin to show a new respect, sensing that he is no longer governed by the same compulsions as before. And a few, the rare few, reveal themselves to be genuine, remaining not because of what he provides, but because of who he is. These are the relationships that endure. The rest were only passing arrangements, sustained by convenience and habit. As this transformation deepens, the man begins to understand that usefulness in itself is not the enemy. The true danger lies in unconscious usefulness, in giving without intention, in serving without direction, in sacrificing without purpose. A sword is useful, but it is not drawn at every moment. A strategist is useful, but he does not reveal every plan. A ruler is useful to his people, but he does not surrender his will to their every demand. Usefulness must be governed, or it becomes a master. And mastery over oneself begins with a single realization, one that changes everything. A man's life is not measured by how much he gives away, but by how much of himself he preserves for the work that only he can do. There comes a stage in this transformation when the man begins to notice something even more unsettling than the loss of time or energy. He begins to see how usefulness reshapes his identity in the eyes of others. At first, he believed people valued him, but now he sees that what they valued was access. Access to his skills, access to his time, access to his reliability, and access, once granted without limit, becomes assumed as a permanent right. This is the quiet erosion of status. In every hierarchy, whether in courts, companies, or families, status is not determined solely by competence. It is determined by perception, and perception is shaped by scarcity, by control, by the ability to choose rather than react. The man who is always available unconsciously lowers his perceived value. Not because he lacks ability, but because he appears to lack boundaries. And boundaries, more than talent, signal self-respect. Self-respect is a language the world understands instinctively. It requires no explanation. It is communicated through posture, through timing, through the willingness to withdraw when necessary. The useful man, before his awakening, rarely withdraws. He believes that constant presence is loyalty, that constant giving is virtue, that constant agreement is harmony. But in reality, constant presence breeds familiarity, and familiarity, when unchecked, breeds disregard. Respect does not survive in an environment of endless availability. Consider the lion in the wild. He does not hunt every hour. He does not roam endlessly in search of approval from the herd. He moves when he chooses, rests when he chooses, appears when he chooses. And because of this, his presence carries weight. The very uncertainty of his movements commands attention. Power is often a matter of rhythm, not force. The awakened man begins to change his rhythm. He does not rush to respond. He does not volunteer for every task. He does not fill every silence with words. And at first, this feels unnatural, almost uncomfortable, as if he is breaking a long-established pattern. But patterns, once broken, reveal how fragile they truly were. He begins to notice that many situations resolve themselves without his intervention. Conflicts that once demanded his mediation settle on their own. Problems that once seemed urgent are forgotten. Deadlines that once created panic are extended or adjusted. And he realizes something profound. Urgency is often an illusion sustained by those who benefit from his compliance. This realization changes the way he perceives pressure. What once felt like obligation now appears as negotiation. What once felt like necessity now appears as choice. And in recognizing choice, he begins to reclaim authority over his time. Authority over time is the foundation of freedom. Machiavelli observed that a ruler who allows others to dictate his schedule soon loses control of his state. Every petition, every request, every demand becomes a chain pulling him in different directions until he is no longer ruling, but merely reacting. The same principle governs the life of any man. When his hours are claimed by others, his destiny is no longer his own, and destiny, once surrendered, is rarely returned. There is also a deeper transformation taking place within him. As he withdraws from constant usefulness, he begins to confront parts of himself he had long ignored, ambitions he postponed, skills he never developed, ideas he never pursued. These fragments of his true self, once buried beneath endless obligations, begin to surface. At first, this can feel disorienting. Without the noise of constant demands, the mind becomes quiet. And in that quiet, a man is forced to face the question he avoided for years. What do I truly want? It is a question more difficult than any problem he solved for others, because it requires honesty, it requires courage, it requires the willingness to disappoint those who expect him to remain exactly as he was. And disappointment, for the former useful man, is a fear deeply ingrained. He was trained to avoid it at all costs, to smooth conflicts, to satisfy expectations, to maintain harmony. But harmony purchased at the cost of one's own life is not harmony. It is surrender. The awakened man begins to accept that some people will be displeased. Some will accuse him of becoming selfish, distant, or changed. And in a sense, they are correct. He has changed. He has begun to place value on his own existence. This shift is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, almost invisible. But its consequences are profound. He begins to plan his days with intention. He begins to protect his time as a resource, not a commodity to be distributed freely. He begins to recognize that every hour given away is an hour that can never be reclaimed. Time is the only currency that cannot be earned back. This understanding sharpens his judgment. He becomes more selective about where he invests his energy. He chooses projects that build rather than merely maintain. He chooses relationships that strengthen rather than drain. He chooses silence over unnecessary conversation, focus over distraction, purpose over approval. And with each choice, his life begins to take shape according to his own design. There is a moment, subtle but unmistakable, when he realizes that he is no longer reacting to the world. He is directing himself within it. The difference is small in appearance, but immense in consequence. Reaction is survival. Direction is power. As this power grows, he begins to see another truth that few recognize. The world does not collapse when he withdraws. It continues. People adapt. Systems adjust. Life moves forward without his constant intervention. And this realization is strangely liberating, because it means he is no longer responsible for carrying what was never his to carry. He can choose where to stand. He can choose when to act. He can choose when to remain still. And in this freedom, he begins to rediscover a sense of dignity that usefulness alone could never provide. Dignity does not come from being needed. It comes from being sovereign. The sovereign man may help others, but he does so by choice, not compulsion. He gives, but he does not deplete himself. He contributes, but he does not surrender control of his life. And in this balance lies a strength far greater than endless usefulness. A strength that cannot be exploited, because it is governed by will. As this sovereignty begins to take root, the man notices something unexpected. The world does not simply react to his change, it tests it. Requests return, sometimes subtly, sometimes with greater intensity than before. Old patterns attempt to reassert themselves. People who once relied on him try again to draw him back into the familiar role. They speak of urgency, of necessity, of how much he is needed. And in these moments, the true transformation is measured, because it is easy to withdraw once. It is far more difficult to remain withdrawn when pressure returns. The pull of habit is strong. The desire to be seen as dependable, as generous, as indispensable, whispers quietly in the mind. But the awakened man begins to recognize this whisper for what it is. Not a voice of virtue, but a remnant of conditioning. a reflex trained over years, perhaps decades, to equate usefulness with worth. And now he sees the danger clearly. A man who ties his worth to usefulness places his identity in the hands of others. If they need him, he feels valuable. If they do not, he feels diminished. His sense of self rises and falls with the demands of the world, like a ship tossed endlessly by changing tides. But a ship that never anchors cannot chart its own course. The sovereign man begins to build that anchor within himself. His worth is no longer measured by how much he provides, but by how faithfully he pursues the life he has chosen. His time becomes sacred, not in a ceremonial sense, but in a practical one. Each hour is seen as a fragment of life itself, not a trivial resource to be spent on every passing request. This perspective changes everything. He no longer rushes to prove his value. He no longer feels compelled to justify his decisions. He understands that explanation is often an invitation to negotiation, and negotiation is often an opening through which control is taken back from him. So he speaks simply. Sometimes he says no without elaboration. Sometimes he allows silence to answer where words once would have rushed forward. Silence, once feared, becomes his ally. There is a particular power in silence that few understand. Silence creates space. It forces others to confront their own thoughts. It interrupts the momentum of demands. And most importantly, it signals that a man is not governed by the expectations of the moment. Machiavelli observed that the most dangerous opponents were not those who shouted, but those who waited. The patient mind sees what the restless mind misses. The quiet observer understands the motives hidden beneath words, the intentions concealed behind urgency, and the sovereign man begins to see these motives everywhere. He notices how often requests are framed as emergencies when they are merely conveniences. He notices how frequently others seek reassurance rather than solutions, delegating not only tasks but also responsibility for their own uncertainty. He notices how easily people surrender their burdens to anyone willing to carry them, and he begins to refuse that burden, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Clarity is colder than kindness, but far more honest. There is also a shift in how he perceives generosity. Before he gave instinctively, almost automatically, as if generosity required no judgment. Now he understands that generosity without discernment becomes self-destruction. A well that pours endlessly into the desert does not create an oasis. It disappears. True generosity is measured, intentional, directed toward what truly matters. It strengthens rather than weakens. It builds rather than merely sustains. And above all, it never requires a man to abandon his own path. This understanding frees him from a subtle guilt that once haunted him. The guilt of saying no. The guilt of choosing himself. The guilt of declining what others believed he should accept. He begins to see that this guilt was never his to carry. It was a tool, often unconscious, used by others to maintain the comfort of their expectations. And once seen, such tools lose their power. The man who once feared disappointing others now begins to see disappointment differently. Disappointment is not always a sign of wrongdoing. Often it is simply the reaction of those who expected control and discovered limits instead. Limits are the architecture of freedom. Without limits, a man's life dissolves into the lives of others. Without limits, every request becomes an obligation, every expectation a chain. But with limits, time regains its structure, energy regains its direction, and purpose regains its clarity. Purpose, once rediscovered, begins to reshape his days. He wakes with intention, not urgency. He works on what advances his own vision, not merely what resolves the crises of others. He invests his strength where it multiplies, not where it is consumed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, his life begins to expand, not in noise or spectacle, but in depth, in focus, in the quiet satisfaction of progress that belongs entirely to him. There is a dignity in this kind of progress that no applause can match, because it is not dependent on recognition. It is not fragile in the face of indifference. It is built on the steady, unshakable foundation of self-direction. And with this foundation comes a new kind of confidence. Not the loud confidence of those who seek validation, but the calm confidence of a man who knows he is no longer drifting. He is steering. This confidence is subtle, but others feel it. They sense the change in his presence, in his posture, in the way he speaks and moves. Some are drawn to it, sensing strength where once there was only reliability. Others are unsettled by it because it reminds them of their own dependence, their own lack of direction. But the sovereign man is no longer governed by these reactions. Approval and disapproval have lost their power over him. He has learned that the world will always judge, always expect, always demand, but it is his choice whether to comply. And in that choice lies the quiet, unassailable core of freedom. There is a final stage in this transformation, one that few reach, not because it is difficult to understand, but because it requires a courage most men never cultivate. It is the stage where usefulness is no longer a compulsion, no longer a reflex, but a weapon chosen deliberately and used with precision. The sovereign man does not reject usefulness entirely. He refines it. He learns to give where it strengthens his position, where it builds alliances of substance, where it advances a vision greater than the approval of the moment. He no longer gives to be liked. He gives to create. And this difference changes everything. Because usefulness, when governed by intention, becomes power. It becomes leverage rather than liability. It becomes a tool placed on the table only when the moment demands it, not a chain worn constantly around the neck. Machiavelli understood this principle well. A ruler who distributes favors too freely weakens himself. But a ruler who grants assistance sparingly, at decisive moments, binds others to him with invisible threads of obligation and respect. Measured generosity creates gravity. The awakened man begins to see this gravity forming around him. When he chooses to help, it is noticed. When he offers his time, it carries weight. When he speaks, others listen, because they know his attention is not easily obtained. Scarcity has transformed his presence. This transformation also alters the way he perceives ambition. Before, ambition felt like a distant dream, something postponed until all responsibilities were fulfilled. But responsibilities, he discovered, are endless. There is always another request, another task, another demand waiting patiently to consume the hours meant for his own creation. Now he understands that ambition cannot wait for permission. It must be protected, guarded, defended against the slow erosion of endless obligations. Every empire, every work of greatness, every life of consequence was built by men who defended their time with ferocity. They were not cruel, they were not indifferent, but they understood that to give everything to everyone is to leave nothing for the work that matters most. And so the sovereign man builds his life as an architect builds a fortress. Each day is structured, each hour placed with intention, each commitment weighed against the vision he is pursuing. Distractions are turned away, unnecessary obligations are declined. Energy is invested where it multiplies. This discipline creates a quiet momentum, almost invisible at first, but powerful beyond measure. Weeks pass and progress accumulates. Months pass and structures begin to rise, where once there was only scattered effort. Years pass and the life he once imagined becomes reality, not through sudden bursts of effort, but through the steady preservation of his focus. Focus is the rarest currency in a distracted world, and the man who controls his focus controls his destiny. There is a scene, repeated in different forms throughout history, that captures this truth. A lone figure sits at a long table in a dimly lit room, papers spread before him, plans unfolding, strategies forming. Outside, the world moves in noise and chaos, but inside, there is silence, concentration, direction. That silence is the birthplace of power, because power is not forged in constant reaction. It is forged in deliberate creation. The useful man reacts. The sovereign man creates. And creation requires time. It requires energy. It requires the ruthless protection of both. As this understanding deepens, the man begins to feel something he has not felt in years, perhaps ever. A sense of ownership over his own existence. The knowledge that his days are no longer fragments scattered among the demands of others, but chapters in a story he is writing himself. This ownership brings a quiet satisfaction, deeper than pleasure, steadier than excitement. It is the satisfaction of alignment, of living in accordance with one's own design, rather than the expectations of the crowd. And with this alignment comes peace. Not the passive peace of comfort, but the active peace of clarity. The peace of knowing where one is going, of knowing why each step is taken, of knowing that one's life is no longer drifting without direction. This is the true reward of escaping the trap of unconscious usefulness. Not isolation, not indifference, but sovereignty. Sovereignty over time, sovereignty over attention, sovereignty over purpose. And from this sovereignty, a new kind of strength emerges. A strength that does not seek applause, does not depend on approval, does not require recognition. A strength rooted in the simple, unshakable knowledge that one's life belongs to oneself. There is a final truth that must be understood, one that Machiavelli himself would have recognized without hesitation. The world does not remember the man who was merely useful. It remembers the man who built, who shaped, who directed, who left behind something that bore the mark of his will. Usefulness may sustain a moment, but vision shapes an era. And so the question remains, not for the world, but for the man listening in silence. Will he spend his life being useful to the designs of others, or will he become the architect of his own? The answer, as always, will not be spoken in words. It will be written in how he chooses to live. If you have made it this far, it is because a part of you already knows this truth. The world rewards usefulness only as long as it benefits others. The moment you become too available, too reliable, or too willing to serve, people stop respecting you and start depending on you. Power belongs to those who choose when to give, not those who cannot refuse. Now tell me in the comments if you are ready to stop being useful at the cost of your own life. If this message touched you and made sense, write in the comments, "I choose my path." Let us see how many here are truly ready to stop living for others and start living with intention. And do not forget, keep watching the next video. It is important, much more than you imagine. See you there.